The beeping was steady, too steady, like a machine, trying to convince you everything was fine when your gut told you otherwise. Luke sat hunched at the end of the hospital bed, his earbuds in, but nothing playing. His grandfather, Henry Garland, lay still, not unconscious, just quiet. He had been that way since the surgery. The doctor said it was routine, but nothing about Henry Garland was routine. "Did they say how long you'd be out?" Luke mumbled, mostly to himself. Henry opened one eye. "Long enough to know you've been using my gum stash. You owe me 2 packs." Luke jumped, then laughed. "You scared me, old man." Henry smiled, thin but real. "That's the first time anyone's called me that without getting a lesson in respect." Luke stood up, heart pounding, not from fear, but relief. He hadn't realized how tight his chest had felt until now. "You good?" Henry nodded slowly. "Good enough to lie again." Luke raised an eyebrow. "What kind of lie?" The old man shifted, wincing slightly. "The kind that takes a car and a weekend, maybe longer." They left the hospital 2 days later against the doctor's recommendation, with Henry signing a paper that Luke jokingly called a permission slip for chaos. They didn't tell Luke's mom. She thought he was staying over at a friend's house. Luke had cleared it with his cousin, just in case she checked. Henry had an old tan Chrysler that looked like it hadn't moved since the early 2000s. The passenger seat squeaked every time Luke shifted. Henry had packed it with a thermos of coffee, 2 peanut butter sandwiches, a beat-up atlas with yellowed pages, and a sealed envelope with the word "end" scribbled in capital letters. "Don't open it until I say," Henry said, sliding it into the glove compartment. Luke glanced sideways. "What is it?" Henry didn't answer. Instead, he pulled onto the highway and turned up the radio, an old station playing Sinatra. They didn't speak for the next 30 miles. They arrived at the first stop by dusk, a diner called Maggie's Mile, the kind of place where the menu hadn't changed since 1974. The sign buzzed faintly, and inside, a red-headed woman in her 60s wiped down the counter with more attitude than energy. "Henry Garland," she said, not even turning fully. "I thought you were dead." "I was," Henry replied with a grin. "Then I heard your meatloaf missed me." She finally looked over, her eyes landing on Luke. "You brought a kid? Since when do you do kids?" "He does me," Luke said, awkwardly. "I mean, he's my grandpa." She chuckled, loud and honest. Poor thing. They sat at the counter. She brought them pie without asking. Cherry for Henry, apple for Luke. "You used to tell me stories about this place," Luke said. "I thought it was made up." Henry didn't look at him. "So did I, after a while." The waitress, Maggie herself, as it turned out, leaned in. "He'd tell you about the jukebox fight. He sang Fly Me to the Moon until a guy knocked him out cold with a sugar shaker." Luke stared. No, he left that part out. Maggie laughed again. "He's good at that." Henry sipped his coffee. "We're going on a tour," he said. "All the places I lied about." Maggie blinked. Then she looked at Luke, softer now. "You're going to learn a lot, kid. Just be ready when it stops being funny." That night, they stayed in a motel across the road. The curtains didn't close all the way, and the TV remote had no back cover. Henry slept with the sealed envelope on the nightstand. Luke stayed awake, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering what kind of truth started with a lie and where it would all end. The morning smelled like motel soap and old upholstery. Luke woke first, brushing crumbs off his shirt. He'd apparently fallen asleep eating chips. Henry was already dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed, lacing up his boots like a man preparing for battle. "We're leaving early?" Luke asked, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. Henry didn't look up. "I want to hit this next place before the sun gets too hot. Might be someone there who still remembers my name." They drove 3 hours west, into a landscape that looked like a movie set for abandonment. Weeds cracked through concrete. The gas stations were boarded up. They passed a rusted billboard half covered by vines. "Welcome to Drybone, where history takes a breath." "Wait," Luke said. "You told me this town burned down." Henry smirked. "It did, mostly. I once bought a deed to the saloon here, off a drunk guy named Otis. Owned it for 6 hours before someone sober showed up." Luke laughed. "You're kidding." "Nope." But when they pulled into the town square, or what was left of it, there were signs of life. A new mural on a half-rebuilt wall, a food truck, and standing beside it, a tall man in a sheriff's hat who looked like he could lift the Chrysler if it displeased him. They got out. Henry adjusted his hat. "Well, shoot, that's Benny Dorr." "Who?" "Guy I accidentally punched once, over a jukebox. Might still hold a grudge." Before Luke could ask more, Benny spotted them and started walking over. "Well, well," Benny said, "Henry Garland, you still owe me a bottle of Old Crow and a front tooth." Luke instinctively stepped closer to his grandfather. Henry didn't flinch. "I thought you left Drybone," Henry said calmly. "I did," Benny replied, "but it's mine again. I bought the land after the last fire. I'm trying to make it something, fix what's left. Unlike you." Luke could feel the tension rising. "We're just passing through," he offered, but Benny wasn't listening. "You talk about this town like it was your playground, like it didn't have real people in it. You want to rewrite your stories? Fine. Just don't try to paint yourself the hero." Henry took a breath. "That's not why I'm here. Not this time." Benny eyed Luke. "Who's the kid?" "My grandson, Luke." There was a pause, a long one. Then Benny reached into the food truck and pulled out 2 iced teas. "Well, then he deserves better than to hear everything from you. Come back later tonight. I'll tell him my version." He handed one of the teas to Luke, then walked off without another word. Later, they sat in silence on a broken bench outside the old saloon. "You really hit him?" Luke finally asked. Henry nodded. "I was 21 and thought Sinatra lyrics counted as philosophy. He hated that song." Luke sipped his tea. "Why do people get so mad at you and your stories?" Henry looked down the empty street. "Because they weren't stories, Luke. They were edits, and I was always the one holding the pen." That night, Benny kept his word. He told Luke stories of bar fights, a stolen jukebox, Henry nearly setting a gas station on fire trying to impress a girl with a poem. He told it without venom, just history. And when it was over, he looked Henry square in the eye and said, "People remember things the way they need to. I just hope you finally need the truth." They left at dawn. In the glove box, the envelope still sat untouched. Luke wanted to ask again, but something told him it wasn't time. Next stop, a lake Henry once described as blue as sin, cold as regret, and the place where he once proposed. Except he never said to whom. The road twisted like a question they hadn't dared to ask yet. Henry drove in silence. his fingers tapping out a slow rhythm on the steering wheel. Luke stared out the window, watching the trees grow denser, then suddenly opened to reveal a glassy lake stretched like a secret between two hills. "This it?" Luke asked. Henry nodded once. "This is where I asked someone to stay forever." Luke looked at him. "Did she say yes?" Henry didn't answer. They parked beside an old wooden dock, half sunken, still clinging to the edge of the water like an afterthought. The lake shimmered soft blue under the early sun. Nearby, a woman in her 40s was fishing with a young boy, maybe 7. She noticed them, nodded politely, and turned back to her son. Henry stepped out of the car slowly. His movements were deliberate now, the recovery from surgery showing in his careful steps. Luke followed, carrying the thermos. "Did you come here a lot?" Luke asked. "Only once," Henry said, "but it was enough." They sat on the dock. The wood creaked beneath them. Henry pulled out a photo from his wallet, a folded, worn snapshot of a woman in a sundress standing beside this very lake, hair whipped by the wind. He handed it to Luke without a word. "She's beautiful," Luke said softly. "She was more than that. She was smart enough to leave." Luke looked over. Henry was staring straight ahead. "I was supposed to meet her here again 2 weeks later, but I got scared. I didn't show. I wrote her a letter instead." "Did she ever write back?" "No," Henry said, with something bitter at the edge of his voice. "But I kept telling people she had. Made up a whole love story around it, one where I wasn't the coward." Silence stretched. Then the woman and her boy wandered closer. She squinted at Henry. "Excuse me," she said, "is your name Henry Garland?" Henry turned slowly. "Depends who's asking." "I'm Liza. My mother was Caroline March." Henry stood up so fast Luke reached out instinctively. "She passed away last year," Liza said gently, "but she kept this photo in her dresser. I always wondered who the man was." Henry blinked, as if trying to swallow time. She kept it?" Liza nodded. "She never married. Said the man she loved disappeared at a lake. I guess this was the one." Henry looked like he might fall. Luke helped him sit. Liza hesitated, then said, "My mom always said he wasn't cruel, just scared, and that's the saddest kind of man." Henry closed his eyes. A tear slipped out, quietly. They sat together for a while, Henry, Luke, Liza, and her son, in a moment that felt like an apology, unfolding in real time. No big speeches, just a ripple in still water. Before they left, Liza handed him something, a page torn from a journal. "She wrote this years later. I thought you should have it." Henry read the last line aloud. "Some men lie because they're proud, but he lied like someone who wanted to be worthy. That's different." Back in the car, Luke asked, "Do you regret not coming?" Henry took a long breath. "I regret not being brave enough to." They didn't speak much after that. But the envelope in the glove box, the one marked "End," somehow felt heavier now. The banner over the gravel lot read, "Summit County Fair, 125 years of corn, cows, and crazy." Henry raised an eyebrow. "It was crazier when I was here last." "You've been to this one?" Luke asked. "I was banned from the pie contest in '71. Let's just say custard and pride don't mix." They laughed, and for a moment it felt like the trip was light again. After the lake, after the photo, after Caroline's daughter, they needed this. The fairgrounds buzzed with families. Kids ran with cotton candy stuck to their shirts. A man juggled flaming pins near a lemonade stand. Livestock contests, kettle corn, bluegrass music. It was pure Americana. Luke grinned for the first time that day. Then Henry froze. Across the midway, a woman in a green apron was handing out flyers in front of a booth for the local newspaper. She looked to be in her 60s, strong posture, gray braid down her back. Her eyes scanned the crowd, then stopped on Henry. "Oh, no," he muttered. "What?" Luke followed his gaze. The woman narrowed her eyes. "Garland?" Henry tried to smile. "Edith?" Edith marched toward them, her jaw tight. "You owe me $3,000 for apologies and a recipe you stole." "Which one?" Henry asked, trying for charm. She didn't blink. "The pie. You know it." Luke stepped in. "Hi, I'm his grandson." She turned to Luke, instantly softer. "Poor child." Then back to Henry. "You ran out of town after the contest. Claimed you invented a bourbon peach miracle. You sold it to a company in Dallas. They ran ads with your face." "It was a misunderstanding," Henry said. "You forged the signature, Henry." Luke stared. "You forged something?" Henry sighed. "A little." Edith waved a flyer in his face. "You think you can come back here after 40 years and walk around like a ghost everyone's happy to see?" Henry looked down. "No. I came back because I stopped wanting to be a ghost." That stopped her for a second. Luke leaned forward. "What if we made it right?" She raised an eyebrow. "We're on this trip," he said, "to see the truth behind his stories. Maybe we could help work your booth, bake pies, help set the record straight." Henry blinked. "We what?" But Edith was already nodding. "You'll work the booth, bake with me, then we'll see." That afternoon, Luke and Henry passed out flyers, poured lemonade, and yes, baked pies in a portable kitchen. It was hot, exhausting, and unexpectedly fun. People stopped. Some recognized Henry. A few sneered, but others smiled. An older man in overalls gave him a nod. "You gave me my first toolbox back in the day. Didn't forget." A teenager said, "You're the guy in the billboard. My grandma still makes your pie." By sunset, Edith handed Henry a fresh sliced bourbon peach, just like before. "I still make it better," she said, but her eyes had thawed. Henry took a bite. "You do?" She smiled. "You're still banned from the contest, though." They laughed. Even Luke. It was the first time Henry had laughed like that since the trip began. That night in the motel, Luke turned to him. "You're more famous than I thought." Henry smirked. "I'm more infamous than famous. There's a difference." "Do you regret what you did to her?" Henry looked at the ceiling. "I regret not staying long enough to fix it." Luke reached into the glove box and tapped the sealed envelope. "Still waiting to open that?" Henry nodded. "We're not done yet." The sun hung low and heavy as they pulled into what barely passed for a town. A single road, one gas pump, and a train station swallowed by sand. Luke stepped out, feeling the heat ripple off the hood of the car. There was no cell service, no birds, just wind, dust, and the hum of something old beneath the earth. Henry stood still, staring at the station. "You used to work here?" Luke asked. "No, I used to wait here," Henry replied. Inside, the waiting room was peeling paint and forgotten echoes. One bench, a schedule board stuck in 1981, and a man sitting behind the cracked ticket window, chewing a toothpick and looking half asleep. The man looked up, saw Henry, and sat upright. "Well, well, thought you were dead," he said. Henry chuckled. Give it time. Luke looked between them. You know each other? The man stood. He was thin, leathery, with deep lines around his eyes. Name's Buck. I used to know his brother. Luke blinked. His what? Henry exhaled slowly. Didn't know you had a brother, Luke said. That's 'cause I stopped saying I did. Buck walked around the counter and sat on the bench, motioning for them to join. James Garland, he said. Worked freight. Lived in that shack out back for a while, said he didn't trust walls with more than 2 windows. Luke sat. Where is he now? Buck scratched his neck. Haven't seen him in 20 years? Maybe more. Said he was going west. Had a fight with Henry, big one. Never said why. Henry sat slowly beside Luke. He asked me for money, Henry said. Said he needed it to start over. I thought he'd waste it, so I gave him a lecture instead of help. Buck looked at him, unimpressed. You always did like your own voice. Henry didn't argue. Luke leaned forward. So, he just vanished? Buck nodded. But he left something. It's in the Lost and Found. Been keeping it just in case. He disappeared into the back and returned with a dusty box, inside which was a bundle of old letters tied with a leather strap. Henry's name was on the top. I never read 'em, Buck said. Didn't feel right. Henry's hands trembled as he untied the bundle. He didn't speak, just stared at the paper. Then one fell free. It was dated 2 years after their fight. Henry read aloud. You were right. I would have wasted it, but I wasted more trying to prove I didn't need you. I hope you're still out there. I hope you didn't close the door all the way. The silence was thick, filled only by wind against the windows. Luke swallowed. Did you? Henry folded the letter gently. Not all the way, but enough. He looked to Buck. You think he ever came back? Buck shrugged. This place is quiet, but it never forgets. You'd be surprised who still wanders through. Back at the car, Luke turned to him. You still have family out there? Henry looked at the horizon. Maybe, or maybe I gave it up too soon. Luke didn't speak. He just opened the glove box and held out the envelope. Henry touched it. Not yet. The diner looked like it had been dropped out of a different decade. Chrome trim, checkerboard floor, red leather booths, faded to pink. A neon sign buzzed faintly overhead. Ginny's Griddle Coffee Truth since 1965. Luke pushed open the door and was immediately hit by the smell of grilled onions and old coffee. It was almost comforting. Almost. Henry walked in behind him, slower now. The trip was starting to show on his posture. A waitress in her 70s gave him a long look, then smiled. Table or trouble? Henry smiled back. Depends on the pie. They sat by the window. Luke flipped through the menu, but Henry was staring at something across the room, a beat-up photo booth wedged between the jukebox and the restroom. Is that the one? Henry asked. The waitress, her name tag read, Dot, followed his gaze. Still works, she said. Mostly takes photos of elbows and confusion now. But back in the day, everyone left a piece of themselves in there. Henry stood up and shuffled toward it. Luke followed. The booth creaked when he sat. There were initials scratched into the side, HGMR, and a tiny carved heart. I carved that, Henry murmured. Luke looked closer. Who's MR? Henry didn't answer. He reached into the coin return tray and found something odd. A folded photo strip curled at the edges. He opened it. 4 pictures. A young woman with dark hair laughing, holding a sign in the last one. "Where'd you go, Henry?" Dot appeared behind them, suddenly quieter. "She came back once a year," she said softly. "Same day, sat in that booth, left a note. I never mailed them, didn't know where to send them." Luke turned to Henry. "Who was she?" Henry closed his eyes. "Mara. I met her after the war. She made me feel seen. I told her everything, except how broken I really was." He took a breath. "She wanted a life. I wanted excuses." Dot handed him a small metal tin. "These are hers. Letters. Over 20 years' worth." Henry took the tin with trembling hands. "She died 3 years ago," Dot said. "Cancer. Her niece buried her with the last note, said it was addressed to a man who never came back." Henry sat down hard in the booth. Luke sat beside him. "What did you tell her when you left?" Luke asked. "I told her I'd be right back," Henry whispered. "I never was." Luke glanced at the tin. "Do you want to read them?" Henry shook his head. "I want to carry them." Back in the car, Henry held the tin like it might break. Luke didn't ask anything, but he watched as Henry opened the glove box again. This time, he took out the sealed envelope. "Tomorrow," Henry said. "We'll read it tomorrow." Luke looked at him. "Is that the end?" Henry smiled, tired but real. "No, it's just the last page." They spent the night in a quiet roadside motel, the kind where the walls hum from the air conditioner and the lamps flickered just enough to feel nostalgic. Luke barely slept. Henry didn't even pretend to try. At sunrise, they sat outside with lukewarm coffee in hand. The road stretched in both directions like the ribbon of a life still unfolding. Henry held the envelope cream-colored, soft with time. The handwriting was his own. Luke waited. Henry exhaled and finally broke the seal. Inside was a single page. No fanfare, no date. "If you're reading this, kid, it means I stopped running. From the stories, the people, and especially from myself." Henry's voice cracked, but he kept reading. "I lied to survive, not because it was smart, but because I was scared the truth would make me smaller in your eyes." Luke looked away. "You were the one person I never wanted to fool. I thought I needed to be the hero, but the older I got, the more I realized maybe I just needed to be real." He paused, swallowed. "So, if we're on this trip, it means I finally got brave, or desperate, or both. Either way, thank you for listening, for driving, for not letting me forget what mattered." Henry stopped. At the bottom of the page was a single line, handwritten more recently in shaky ink. "P.S. There's a photo under the spare tire. Thought you should see it." Luke blinked. "Wait, what?" They rushed to the trunk, lifted the mat, and there it was, a small photo, face down. Henry picked it up and turned it over. It was a photo of Luke, a baby version, held in the arms of a woman neither of them had seen in years. Henry's estranged daughter, Luke's mother. Behind them was a younger Henry, standing in the doorway, watching, not quite stepping forward. Luke stared. "You were there?" Henry nodded, his voice breaking. "I watch from the porch every Sunday. I couldn't fix what I broke, so I settled for shadows." Luke looked at him. "You could have come in." Henry finally looked his grandson in the eyes. "I didn't know how." The next day, they reached home, Henry's real home. Luke helped him to the porch. This time, Henry didn't hesitate. Together, they hung photos. They unpacked memories. They cooked one of Mara's recipes from a letter, and they invited over Liza and her son, Buck, from the station, and even Edith from the fair, who brought bourbon peach pie with just a hint of forgiveness. Luke found a frame for the letter, not to hang in pride, but to remember what courage actually looks like. An old man in a car, finally telling the truth. What would you do if your grandparent revealed a lifetime of lies, only to show you what love really looks like? Tell us in the comments and share this story if it touched your heart. What would you do if your grandparent revealed a lifetime of lies, only to show you what love really looks like? Tell us in the comments and share this story if it touched your heart.